a lot of great information. So now I think we could start taking questions. One thing I did want to mention, because we do have RFAs and RFPs active, we cannot answer questions directly about those particular things, but any broad program type questions, we're absolutely here to entertain. So Becca, I'm going to let you direct the questions to me, and then I'll share them with the group. So, so there's a question directed to me asking about an amazing project I've seen and why was it so successful? So I have seen tons of amazing projects that have been successful, and I don't think I can pick just one, but what I would like to do, because I think Megan, other than me, is our most senior grant specialist around here. Megan, tell us about something that surprised you, a project that you thought was interesting, and just, yeah, fill us in.
Sure. So when I joined this program and started doing the grant monitoring, it's a little hard to see when you just jump into it. You're doing all these things every day and supporting, but until last year and last Recycle Colorado, when we kind of put a presentation together of all of these great projects that we have been monitoring, there was a few. I mean, I love them all. I love to see all of them like complete and be done, and that we supported them and that they were able to accomplish what they set out to do. A few that I like, PCs for People was one that was really neat to see the whole process. They support a lot of workers that may not get jobs otherwise, and they have a great process. And during COVID, they really had a great process going where they supported communities that needed laptops urgently, but they basically reuse laptops and electronic equipment, which was really neat. So I really liked seeing that one. I mean, but again, they're all so great. It's really hard to pick one.
Sorry, that was kind of an unfair question to send your way. I think Randy has his question waved or raised.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you for this. This is an awesome opportunity to ask about these grant programs, which we know have played an important role in our development here around recycling and zero waste in Colorado. I actually have like a two-part question about the grant programs. One is, when we set up the Forward Grant program just in the last year and worked on that bill, you know, sort of the thinking, at least, and I know this was not formal, but the thinking was, with the Forward Grant money focusing on the Front Range, that it would open up REO to be more focused around the rest of the state. And so I'm curious as to, has that evolved in that way, or how is that handled now? You know, especially I love the fact that you've consolidated both grant programs, you know, within CDPHE. So I was just curious about how the two programs work with each other, given geography focus of the Forward Grant. And then my second question is specific to REO, but when does it sunset? And just so that we are aware of that important date, because I'm not, and I would like to be made aware of that. And then this is related to the first question. If there needs to be more of a focus for REO on the rest of the state, do you think that when it sunsets and we try to re-up it through the legislature, would it be helpful to make that more of a focus within the legislative process?
So I will try to field all those, Randy. Let me know if I missed one in there somewhere. So REO has continuously had a dual mandate. It's had the waste diversion goal, but it's also had a job creation or an economic sort of boost kind of goal. So it's a little different than Forward on that front. For that reason, over time, we've created basically a scoring rubric that gives some bonus points to underserved parts of the state. And of course, that continues. So I don't think that the idea that Forward is Front Range centric eliminates the Front Range capacity for REO, but I think REO has and will continue to have those rural aspects built in. I don't know that it will be that way forever, but I think right now that's how we're viewing it. So I think of the last round, and I could be wrong. Anyone who wants to correct me, jump in. I think of our 12 projects, we just approved 4 of them were metro and the rest were more rural. So that was the first part. The second part was, sorry, I already forgot. I knew that would happen.
Well, the main part of that second question is, when will REO sunset?
Oh, yes, right. So I believe that's 2026. And I think right now, until we see what happens with, I think it's really hard right now to predict what we want things to look like in a year, let alone that far in the future. So sorry, I don't have a good answer for that, but I do think it's a moving target, and yeah, we need to pay attention and see what we can do to make things better, for sure. Thanks for those questions, Randy. Okay, bear with me one second while I scroll up. There's a long question here.
There was another question from Carolyn. I don't know if you're able to answer that in relation to the current RFAs, but I'm wondering if you have a general answer for, does REO mini grants have a different focus than the waste diversion grants?
So I would say the two offerings, actually, I'm going to let Megan talk to this because she developed the RFA for the mini grant, and I'm not going to talk so much. That was the whole goal.
Sorry. Okay, so they're a little bit different. I mean, they're both waste diversion focused, but I would say that they are just a little bit different. The mini grant has some specific, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kendra, some specific items that can be in the budget categories, such as like supplies and equipment, contractual and so forth. So I guess I could say it's a little more specific and quite a bit less funding. So it doesn't really support personal services or, staffing costs and so forth, because it's only $25,000 per awardee. And I'm sure there's more to that, Kendra.
So I think some great mini grant projects we funded in the past have been sort of small scale. I'm trying to remember, I think it was the Douglas County School District actually did their own sort of little grant process with our funding to encourage classrooms to compete for like recycle and compost bins in the classrooms. We've had outreach campaigns. There are some new requirements and pretty specific details we need around those to make sure that we can do them in the time frame. They're real short. They're sort of fast and furious, 5 to 25,000, and the whole term is probably just over 6 months by the time everything's executed. So tight. But the whole idea behind the mini grant is to create a streamlined application. So if you've done an infrastructure application and completed a mini grant application, you'll definitely notice the difference. And then also to streamline it for staff so that we can support more of them. So I hope, does that answer your questions, Carolyn? Sorry, I didn't mean to miss the second one. Okay. I'm scrolling. Becca, tell me if I'm missing stuff. I'm scrolling through the
So
chat.
right now, the question, this can be for overall our REO or forward program, but we're looking to apply for a zero waste grant. What advice would you give for best practices as an applicant?
Haley, can I turn that over to you?
Yeah, I would love to answer this question. I think it's just really fun to talk about. Just in general, and this isn't about a specific RFA that's open at this time, but our best advice is to answer every question that we ask. All of those questions are developed very deliberately by the boards and by the staff. Even if the answer is just no, or that doesn't apply to me, tell us why that doesn't apply to you. Like, really answer the question. And then also use the scoring rubric at the end of the RFA. So we tell you exactly how the grants are going to be scored. We'll tell you exactly how many points you're going to get, like what a great answer looks like versus what a poor answer looks like. If you follow that scoring rubric, which relates back to those questions, you're going to be able to, put forth your best application, because you'll know, exactly kind of what the board and the evaluation teams are looking for. So definitely answer each question and use the scoring rubric. I think that some of the most exciting projects are really those that that hit the mandates for both programs. So for RREO, that's waste diversion translated to tonnage and job creation. So if you can hit those 2 points, you know, you're going to stand out. And for forward, it is really waste diversion. We have some very specific waste diversion goals in statute. You know, our final goal is to hit 51% diversion by 2036. That's a really high goal, but to get there, you know, that's why we really value projects that can show a lot of tonnage. That doesn't mean that projects that show low tonnage are automatically scored lower, but the more that you can show that you're helping both of these programs meet their goals, the higher, you know, the more exciting like your project is going to be to the evaluators. Also, you know, the more community support you have and the more like further along, you know, your project is. So is it just an idea versus, you know, I've already been doing this work for 3 years or whatever, and I just need a little bit of grant funds to make it like take me to that next rung on the ladder. And then I say for forward to what is really in our zero waste RFAs, I think one of the most exciting projects that we can see is basically moving communities up that zero waste ladder towards universal curbside pay as you throw. So for example, one of the projects that Forward funded in its first round was helping Arvada set up its first curbside recycling program. So those are the types of programs that are projects that really stand out to the board.
How about for the RREO? Do you have any specifics of what makes a project stand out for the RREO?
And we kind of have to be a little careful with the open RFAs, but Dylan, would you like to just kind of talk about some of the important keys to RREOs and RREO projects?
Yeah, so the past the grants that I've been monitoring within the past 11 months have been doing a lot with tons diverted. So a lot of the grantees there have a lot of tons that they're diverting also, as well as having job creation, and it was mainly an infrastructure grant that was awarded last year, and that the grantees that were awarded I'm monitoring right now. So just kind of getting a few equipment pieces for them that they need to, like, again, like Haley said, get them to that next level. So I know for one of the grantees, we helped them get a truck and then a sign for their facility. We have actually purchased a few vehicles for a few grantees as well, and then just opening up a drop-off facility for another grantee. So just kind of helping the grants kind of take that next step of getting their tonnage up there for waste diversion. So.
Thanks, Dylan. So I think Van has his hand raised for a question.
Hey everyone, thank you again for hosting this session. I had a question about the zero waste ladder. So I guess in the forward program, so this zero waste ladder grant that comes out once a year, it seems like it's better for municipalities to apply for. That being said, maybe a lot of municipalities are swamped, or they don't have the capacity to apply for them. Maybe they don't have a good proposal, or maybe they're not that familiar with the forward program yet. And so businesses like Compost Colorado, you know, we're eager to work with some of these municipalities and to help them climb this ladder. I wonder if y'all could offer any advice on how to, just general advice on how to try to work with municipalities. I think that they can feel a little bit like they're in an uncomfortable situation if they are being courted by one hauler and there's maybe two haulers operating in their community and they want to be fair. That being said, like, you know, if they don't want to work with us or another hauler on on a project, it seems like they might be slowing down progress a little bit for the sake of fairness. So I'm just kind of curious if y'all had any advice on how to sort of, try to, for businesses that are trying to apply for some of these grants in partnership with municipalities.
So I don't think we can get too far in the weeds right now with that being the open RFA for forward, but I mean, I think it's going to be all about outreach to the communities you want to work with. I don't know how helpful that is. That's probably not that something you haven't thought of, but I think it's just going to be a matter of reaching out. But I also think too that communities enter into contracts, municipalities in particular, if they don't do their own hauling with haulers. So that's a whole other conversation, but that's about as much as I think I can share right now. Sorry.
So here is it's more of a curiosity. Is there anything within the two programs in relation to electronic waste? For example, computers, printing machines, fax machines, etc. And that's all that was.
So, Sonia, if I punted that one to you, would you be comfortable answering?
Do my best. I think I can. Yeah. I mean, I think that electronic waste would certainly be something that would be potential for funding for Forward and RREO. I was trying to think. I don't think that Forward has funded anything specific to e-waste in our first RFA. But what about RREO? One of the RREO?
RREO has funded electronic projects. Yeah, electronic waste projects for sure. Forward has not yet. But I think, those will just be projects that we continue to support and in RREO, and then Forward, the board will have to decide if that's something that they want to take up.
It is included in the Forward strategic plan as one of the materials that is something to focus on and allowable under the RFAs. It's not currently excluded from our general RFAs.
All right, here's another question. How do you weigh the equalness of projects related to rural versus urban? How do you weigh that?
I'll take that one. Basically, it all comes down to scoring rubrics, and our RFAs share the scoring rubric. It's built in. So for Forward, rules is not part of currently not part of their program because they're focused on those 13 front range counties, where REO is the 64 statewide.
I would also at this point make a shameless plug for the business partnership showcase slideshow that we put together, which also, I don't know if you can hear my dog dreaming very loudly in the background. Pinto is having his star moment. Very loud. So this slideshow basically showcases REO and Forward projects that are under contract. And it also talks about the tons diverted or expected to be diverted, and in like total amount awarded and which Colorado counties the projects take place in. So that's kind of a nice snapshot to see where the activity is happening for the Forward and REO grant funds.
Thank you, Sonia. She did a great job putting that together for us as well. So, shout out.
All right, we have another question. Outreach and education are so important to help lower contamination and increase participation in programs, yet they are hard to tie directly to tonnage. Do you take that into consideration?
So I'm gonna let Haley speak to that for Ford, because I think she, being the senior authority, might be able to answer that a little better, but for our REO, I will just say yes.
Yeah, for forward, the quick answer is yes. And you know, if again, I would just say to refer to questions in the RFAs and the scoring rubric to understand how the board places importance on those aspects of projects.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you able to get both grants? So if you live in the Front Range, can you get both grants within, how does that work?
Yes. So if you live in this, if you're in Colorado, if you're a Colorado recycler, you're eligible for our area, period. If you're a Front Range recycler, you're eligible for REO and forward.
How often can you receive grants from the RREO or forward?
There is no limit, so no official limit. Of course, part of the goal of our programs are to offer, you know, an equitable amount of access across the programs in the state. So yeah, but if you're funded in one grant cycle, there's nothing that precludes you from being funded in another grant cycle. Same thing with the two programs. If you're funded by REO, nothing stops you from being funded then by forward, except for location, obviously.
I just want to add a little bit to that. For forward, there is currently a cap set in legislation in the statute that authorizes forward, that no single grant can receive more than 20% of the annual revenue in a year. That is what helps the board set their cap for the awards. So you'll see in RFAs that, you know, you can there's a cap on, you know, how large your grant project can be. And that comes from statute. So that's the only restriction that the board currently places, because we have to in statute on how much a grantee can receive, but it's based on annual revenue, and that is provided to the public through the RFAs. Basically, we already make that calculation for you and let you know what that cap is.
Thanks, Haley. I totally did not say that.
Okay, so this.
Somebody has a raised hand.
Oh.
Carolyn?
Hi. If anybody else has questions, feel free to jump in. But I have a question about the forward grant from the perspective of a trash hauler, as someone who maybe owns a landfill. For example, the Dad Landfill Waste Management, do they pay higher tip fees even if they own a landfill? And are you seeing that give trash haulers incentive to find ways to get their customers to reduce their trash? Does that make sense as a question or not so much?
Haley, can you answer that?
Yeah,
not so much.
Yeah.
I'll clarify a little bit. I know the tip fees went up for people who are tipping, which might be like a Republic Services who doesn't have a landfill. I'm curious if they're changing their behavior because of that. And then in addition, I'm curious about the trash companies that do have landfills. If their costs are going up to have landfills at all.
I mean, I can't exactly speak to what the landfill owners have in the works. That I don't really know exactly, but I do know that the ideas that, and because I've heard this from some of our board members who are haulers and kind of work on the landfill side, that eventually, yes, they will intend to increase contract prices, but you know, contracts are often set for several years, you know, 1 to 3 years, maybe on that higher side, for like commercial entities or a contract with a hauler in a municipality. So it's not exactly like something that they can kind of go 1 for 1, and the forward fee increased by 15 cents this year, so therefore we're going to automatically increase your cost. There's going to be a lag time to that, but I do know that that is some intention. I've heard from some haulers that they would eventually work to increase prices, just like they would for any other increase in fees or taxes. These fees are not taxes, but just in general, increase in fees or taxes on businesses will typically eventually translate to increase in contract prices. I hope that answers your question. Cool.
So it looks like we have a question from Jane. Can I take that one, Becca? Is that one next in line?
Yep, that's great.
It says, do you have any recommendation for nonprofit groups or other community members on how to encourage local government or public agencies to apply for these grant opportunities? No. No, so I think the key would be to send them to our website. We have a lot of information out there, but I think a lot of it is getting them tuned in. And honestly, I think if you want government or public agencies to be proactive, I think they're going to need pressure from the folks in those communities. I just really think that that's it. I don't know what we as a grant program can do to encourage it other than to share information. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but be happy to clarify.
And I think, for Forward, that's exactly the reason that the Forward board has put forth this RFP to hire a technical assistance service provider, is to do exactly that, to help bring these communities in, to encourage them and help them apply for grant opportunities, and even, develop the projects that they could then apply for grant opportunities or funding through Forward. And it looks like, Jane, you're in Leadville, I'm assuming from just your Zoom name, but so Leadville wouldn't be, communities in your area aren't eligible for the technical assistance to come out of that Forward program. But, I'd say you could kind of look to that program to see, what strategies they're using. Eventually, all of that will be public record. That provider will be reporting to the board, and we make all of that information public in meeting minutes that we post every month, etc. We'll be publishing reports on what that technical assistance service provider does, and all kinds of other public communication about the program. And so that could be something that maybe rural areas could grab some ideas from.
Thanks, Haley. Great information.
We have a question. Mention real quick, just that I know within the Forward RFAs, and I think this might be true for RREO, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also an opportunity for community members and other organizations to upload or to submit with the Forward application a letter of engagement or letter of support. So that, offering as a nonprofit to write a letter of support for a local government or other public agency who's pursuing Forward funds is certainly taken into consideration with that application. I don't know if that helps.
So we have a question from Wolf. What are the eligibility requirements for RREO rebates, and how are the rebates calculated? So eligibility requirements, I'm gonna let Megan start and Dylan jump in, because they both just handled our rebate process, and I think they can share some good info.
Sure. So drop-off sites, eligible drop-off sites must accept at least 3 different materials for recycling or accept a single stream recyclable. Each site must have containers that collectively equal a minimum of 12 cubic yards of capacity. And then each drop-off site must collect a minimum of 10 tons of qualifying materials. And then it's a 2-part formula. 60% of it is allocated based on the tonnage recycled and the miles traveled to bring recyclables to the nearest processing facility. And then the other part of the fund is allocated based on the total number of eligible recycling drop-offs. And Dylan, let me know if I've missed anything.
No, I think you got it. The maximum miles that each recycling drop-off can apply for is, I think it's up to 250 miles, I believe. Is that correct, Megan? Yeah.
Thank you both. Van, do you have a question?
Yes. Hey again. This is inspired by Randy's earlier question. I'm kind of curious if y'all, as the administrators of these programs, do y'all feel like you have been tapped like appropriately for policy consulting, and like, do you feel like you could be like your insights could be used better for crafting better enterprise fund policy? I wonder how, because y'all are, have so much experience with this, if you could sort of have more executive control, how you would change the programs, like if you could have perhaps more of a recurring open proposal type setup, or if you would offer more smaller grants, higher frequency. I'm just kind of curious if you could change things, what you would do.
So as department employees, we don't get involved in policymaking. That's definitely not something that we can do. But from a staff perspective, we look for efficiencies. We look for ways to support the community with technical assistance, or answer questions, or do meetings like this, as well as support our grantees to the best of our ability. So we leave all of that to the actual legislature and policymakers. So sorry, gonna avoid that one a little bit. So there's a question here. We have both a Denver and a Fort Collins business unit. Can both units apply for grants? So if I'm understanding, you're saying, I think the question is, could they apply independently? And my answer there is, depending on qualifications, and if it's forward or REO, yes. Depending on percentage and the type of business, the specifics that Haley mentioned previously in regard to forward. But yes, there's nothing from stopping each unit from applying and or both applying together. And just in general, you can have a grant application that includes more than one entity as part of the project, but one generally has to be the responsible party, the one who's going to sign and make sure all requirements are satisfied.
I have another question. Do you have to have matching funds to receive the grants? You're muted.
Kendra, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Trying to call in Yasmina here. Yasmina, are you comfortable with that answer, with answering that question?
Well, kind of. So what I know so far, that we do have a requirement for forward programs, for forward funds when it comes to haulers. Is that correct, Haley? So they would need, and that would be specifically for infrastructure, and they would need to come up with 50% of the match. I hope I did answer the question correctly.
So just more broadly across the REO program as well. REO does not generally require matching. I think we've had one grant offering since I've been part of the program that did require a match. But in terms of scoring, the more skin you have in the game, usually the better you score. So just sort of a general rule of thumb.
Do we have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, let's try working a couple in.
So after a grant is awarded, when will the funds be received? And then in addition to that, the second part is what needs to be implemented in order to receive the grant funds? Like once you've been approved, what do you have to do to ensure that you get those funds?
Okay, I'm gonna toss the first part to Megan. Megan, about how long is that time frame between knowing you have the award and then being able to start really doing the work?
So I would say, well, for the most recent RREO, I'll just use as an example. I believe we awarded or notified awardees at the beginning of May, and we expect to execute contracts by, I would say probably end of July, August. So that time frame is a few months, just because we do require, we do a lot of checks on our side, which we reach out to the grantees and then hand it over to Yasmina to write statements of work and develop budgets and the contract and so forth. And then it goes to a lot of other places that it has to be signed and stuff. So it is quite a long process, a few months, I would say at least.
And if you're the grantee, the faster you get information to us and respond to our questions, the faster we can turn your contract around and get you to work. Just a hint. The second part of that, I believe, Becca, was how long does it take once you're funded to actually start receiving reimbursements? Was that the second part?
Correct. And then like what kind of additional documentation needs to be done in order to receive the grants?
Okay, tossing that one to you, Sonia.
I would say within the administration of the contracts, making like you put the scope of work together with a bunch of different deliverables. Once that contract is signed, I can then help you send in those deliverables. If they're fulfilled, then you submit a reimbursement request with a proof of payment, proof of what was purchased, and I'm forgetting one component of that. Anyway, basically who was paid, what it was for, and the payment cleared. And then we process the reimbursement and get you paid. Did I answer the question?
Great. And I think there's a question. So just kind of a round, I'll call on you. What's the best part of your job? Sonia, you're unmuted. You get to go first.
Oh, I said helping awesome grantees achieve their goals. Yeah.
Nice. Yasmina.
The same with me, just, seeing, for example, I live in Arvada, and I was super excited to, learn about the recycling carts that will be coming on our streets. So, seeing the projects flourish for sure.
Dylan.
I just working with the contracts last year when I first got on, just getting them off the ground, just kind of seeing that whole process of the whole grantees getting everything together, and now coming up with the site visits and everything, kind of seeing those programs through. So just seeing the whole grant process through with the grantees and just seeing them making a big difference in their communities.
Haley.
I'd echo Sonia and Yasmina, obviously helping communities.
Uh-oh, Haley, somehow you got remuted.
My cat did that, thank you.
Oh.
So helping communities start new recycling programs, even if that means on the private side, right? So private haulers or consultants actually helping, divert waste from the landfill. I've also particularly enjoyed working with our boards and, getting to know them and just seeing all the hard work that they do and the extreme commitment that all of them have to advancing those goals and serving the citizens and the communities of Colorado.
And Megan, real quick, because I think we're over by about a minute. And also, will you answer Dee's question about when we expect to notify the mini grant awardees?
Yes, so I would quickly just agree with everybody on here, just seeing the projects and helping and getting to know and learning so much is just the best part of the job. And then for mini grants, I believe the time frame to notify awardees is, let me look real quick, I had a calendar up. So mid-September is when we hope to notify.
All righty, thanks everyone.